Welcome one and all to the online learning platform at Department of Civil Engineering, BMS Institute of Technology and Management, Bangalore. I am Dr. Rajesh Gopinath and you are along with me for the course Water Supply and Treatment Engineering, popularly also termed as Environmental Engineering. Slide 5. In the last session, we had discussed about filtration. Slide 6. Until the session with respect to filtration, we had discussed about physical and chemical impurities which could be present inside drinking water, a water body, and the removal of the same. In today's presentation, we shall be discussing about the microbial contamination which is possible in a water body. That is, as seen in slide 6, today's presentation delves on disinfection. Slide 7. I shall be covering today's presentation in the following manner. First, I'll introduce you to the basic concepts. Further, I'll move on to the theoretical aspect, that is the conceptual coverage. I shall also be discussing about the evolution of disinfection. Then, I shall be discussing the different methods of disinfection, their relative merits and demerits. Further, I'll be summarizing today's presentation before moving on to the list of references. Please note, by end of this presentation, you will be able to define what is a disinfectant or disinfection. You will be able to list the different types of disinfectants or disinfection mechanisms. You also will be able to mention the different factors which influence disinfection. And you will also be able to compare among the different disinfectants the merits and demerits. Let us start the lesson. Slide 8. It is very important for all of us to understand that microorganisms are present in the environment in abundance. Hence, water is no exception. A variety of microorganisms or microbes also live in the fresh water. Whether it is your littoral zone, limnatic zone, or the benthic zone. Across all these, you will definitely find microorganisms. Yes, these are not visible to the naked eye. The littoral zone, for instance, which is the region of water body near a shoreline, which is well lighted, shallow and warm. It also supports photosynthetic algae and bacteria which use sunlight to thrive in this zone. Further, away from the shore, we find the limnatic zone. Here also, photosynthetic microbes will be present. Now, as you move deeper in the water, the extent of sunlight is hampered, temperature becomes colder. In this context, there are microorganisms which can thrive without the need for oxygen. For instance, the purple and green sulfur bacteria. Finally, if we are talking about the benthic zone, which is the bottom of the fresh waters, here also you would find microorganisms which are strictly anaerobes. For instance, methane producing bacteria. So, we should now be able to realize that since water can contain a variety of microorganisms, water hence will also be a potential means of transporting microorganisms from one place to another. Let us take the case of ballast water itself. We are all aware that water which is carried in the hull of a ship is meant to stabilize the vessel during their voyages. Therefore, as a ship travels from one continent to the another, it is transporting water from that region to this region. Eventually, along with the water, it would be carrying potential microorganisms which can be pathogens, that is, disease-causing microorganisms. Since we are speaking about pathogens, that is disease causing organisms, I would also like to bring to your attention about indicator organisms. We had discussed about this in the previous sessions. Indicator organisms are those microorganisms which are present in water in the case of any contamination, and these organisms by themselves are not pathogenic, that is, they do not cause any diseases. However, their very presence indicates the potential presence of pathogens along with them. I shall not be delving too much about indicator organisms since it is beyond the concept of this presentation. However, the objective of studying disinfection is to understand that presence of pathogens such as Vibrio cholerae, Salmonella typhi, Shigella are going to cause waterborne diseases, and this is eventually a consequence of unhygienic conditions. Let us move on to slide 9. Slide 9 gives us a glimpse of a sample set of certain pathogens and the waterborne diseases that they cause. We need to remember that when we had discussed the concept of waterborne diseases in previous sessions, we had come to an understanding that there are several varied ranges of bacteria and viruses which can be fatal if present in the drinking water or a fresh water body which serves as a water for water supply scheme. Alright, with this understanding, let us now move on to the next slide, that is slide 10. Let us first try to clearly distinguish between two terms, disinfection and sterilization. Please remember, both have similar objectives. Disinfection is the process of complete destruction or prevention of growth of all microorganisms. Let me repeat, all microorganisms irrespective of a pathogen or a non-pathogen. Okay, so let me reiterate. Disinfection is the process of destroying the growth or presence of any microorganism in your drinking water. Sterilization, on the other hand, is a process of achieving eradication of microorganisms on any surfaces. So, disinfection is associated with water and sterilization is associated with materials or surfaces. In an hospital, you often hear the word sterilization, that is gloves or any medical equipment that the doctors employ. That is to ensure that no microorganisms are present on these materials or surfaces or apparatus which can cause diseases to the patient. Let us understand that disinfection is the final process, the final treatment which is given to a water before it is subjected to distribution. So we need to understand that all other treatments such as sedimentation, flocculation, coagulation, filtration, though they serve a purpose, you still cannot send water to consumers without disinfection. In fact, disinfection is a stand-alone process which needs to be given if other treatments cannot be given to water. Please note, in the absence of all other processes, disinfection alone can be employed as a single effective treatment process. The bottom line is, only if disinfection is carried out, you can be assured that the water is safe to consume. As you can see in slide 10, as I have reiterated, the disinfection is the final barrier in water supply scheme to handle pathogens. And when I say so, as per water quality indexing or as per water quality standards, you are expected to ensure not more than 0 count or 0 most probable numbers of microorganisms in your drinking water. let us try to have a brief understanding of the role played by units such as coagulation, flocculation, sedimentation, softening, filtration and adsorption in combating disinfection. I am trying to explain this to you to enhance the sensitivity of every individual to the most important process, the most important operation in water supply scheme, which is disinfection. Let us say we speak about the treatment such as coagulation. We are all aware coagulation is a process followed by flocculation wherein suspended solids are removed. We need to understand that since coagulation and flocculation indulges in addition of chemicals and slow mixing, they also serve to remove microorganisms, but not 100%. Laboratory scales have confirmed that depending on alum or ferric salts, you can remove about 90% of microorganisms, which means there is still a threat of 10% of microorganisms. The microbial removal happens once they get stuck in the chemical floc or during the vigorous mixing. If you take the context of water softening, even here, provided if the pH is less than 10, then about 90% microbes are removed, because the conditions would be very similar to a coagulation. However, if your pH is less than 3 and greater than 11, then the removal efficiency will be 99%, but still it will not be 100%. Also, if you're talking about softening, that is with lime, here as well the removal of microorganisms would be about 75% or so. More or less all these operations carry out removal of microorganisms through microbial inactivation, that is creating conditions for them which are not favorable for their growth. Even if you talk about filtration process, microorganisms are removed but not to an extent of 100%. Having understood the relative significance of the various operations and processes towards eliminating microorganisms, having now confirmed that disinfection is a prime operation or a process which cannot be done away with, let us now understand its evolution. Let us now move on to the next slide, slide 11. Please note, the first documented attempts to treat drinking water have been recorded in ancient Greece and as well in Sanskrit, that is with respect to India, and these date back to 2000 BC, which means during that time also people were aware that water contains microbes and they need to be killed so that water is safe. During those days, the disinfection technique mostly dealt with boiling the water. Also, apart from boiling, the treatment techniques also spoke about filtration and straining. Let me make it very clear to you. If in case your water is turbid, then the effect of disinfection would not be high. So it is very interesting and important to note that even during the olden era, people were aware that it is important to remove the turbidity in a drinking water if disinfection had to be effective. In fact, the famous Greek scientist Hippocrates had invented the first cloth bag filter, which was around 500 BC. And he believed that in case if the water tasted and smelled clean, it would be healthy for the body. His invention is called as the Hippocratic sleeve, and this is still used by doctors and dentists in the present era. Also, during the olden days when there was no microbial analysis or bacteriological test possible, all scientists or all doctors would depend on the presence of chlorides in drinking water. That is, if in case the water body or drinking water has chlorides present in abundance, it would indicate that this water source has been contaminated with human waste, because chloride is present in human food intake. Now, since then, there has been a sufficient evolution, and presently the presence of microorganisms is assessed by microbiological analysis. Even this concept was dealt by us in the previous sessions, that is with respect to microbiological analysis, bacteriological test, which comes under biological testing itself. If you remember, we had spoken about membrane filter technique. Okay, we also spoke about multiple tube fermentation technique, which encompassed presumptive test, confirmed test, completed test. Since it is still beyond the scope of this presentation, I shall not be delving about them, and you are welcome to go back to my previous lectures and sessions with respect to biological characteristics of drinking water, wherein we had addressed about pathogens, indicated organisms, and biological tests. Now, let us move on further and let us try to understand the kinetics of disinfection. Let's move on to slide 12. Now, when you're talking about disinfection, we are talking about microbial inactivation. Microbial inactivation is actually a gradual process which involves a series of physicochemical and biological steps. And as you can see in slide 12, it is described by the equation Nt by N0 is equal to e to the power minus Kt, wherein N0 is the number of microorganisms at time 0. Nt is the number of microorganisms at a given time t. K is of course a decay constant, and T stands for time. As you can see in the graph, ideally microbial inactivation follows a first order kinetics, that is the blue line. Okay. However, most often non-ideal behavior also would occur, which results from clumping of cells or multiple hits of critical sites before inactivation. The effectiveness of disinfection, or rather chlorination, would basically depend on two factors. One is the contact time, the rate of exposure of a microorganism to a disinfectant. The second one being the concentration of disinfectant. Now, the contact time is basically explained by the Chick's law, which is described by the equation that you can see in your slide. That is day by n by day by t is equal to minus k nt, wherein day by n by day by t is the rate of change in the concentration of microorganisms with a given time t. K is of course the inactivation rate constant, and Nt stands for the number of organisms at time t. Okay, please note. Depending on the type of chemical agent, it has also been observed that within limits, disinfection effectiveness is related to the concentration of disinfectant which has been used. From the equation, that is K is equal to K dash Cn, okay, wherein K is the inactivation rate constant, K dash is a die-off constant, C stands for concentration of disinfectant, and of course N represents the coefficient of dilution. Please note, if N is equal to 1 in this equation, then both the concentration or time are equally important. Let us say N is greater than 1. It means concentration is more important than time. Say N is less than 1, then time is more important than concentration. So basically I am trying to explain to you the relative significance of contact time and disinfectant concentration in the concept of disinfection with respect to its kinetics. Okay, please note the disinfectant effectiveness, which is being expressed as C dot T, okay, wherein C stands for the concentration of disinfectant and T stands for the time required to inactivate 99% of the population. In this context, if you wish the disinfection to be effective, then obviously the C dot T value has to be least. So my dear friends, in this slide with respect to kinetics of disinfection, to summarize, You have understood that disinfection happens through a combination of physico-chemical and biological process. It is expressed in the form Nt by N0 is e to the power minus Kt. There are two critical factors which decides the effectiveness, which is the contact time given by Schick's law and the concentration of disinfectant. The equation for which is, the equation of the former, that is contact time being day bar N by day bar T is equal to minus K Nt, and the equation for the latter being K is equal to K dash Cn. Finally, I had told you that the disinfectant effectiveness, that is C dot T, would be most effective when it is at its least value. Now, with this understanding, let us proceed further. Let us go to the next slide, that is slide 13. Let us have a brief understanding of the various factors which influences disinfection. Yes, there are a variety of disinfectants which is available in the current world, and each of them have their merits and demerits, their efficiency when it comes to disinfection, which we will be studying further in the slides. Also, the type of microorganisms, some of them being fragile, some of them being robust and rigid to the varying disinfectants. Yes, we have already spoken about the disinfectant concentration and the contact time in the previous slides. pH. Yes, when there is extreme pH existing, as I told you in the previous slides, say below 3 or more than 11, then also disinfection will be greater. Temperature, of course, we are all aware of boiling. So higher or elevated the temperature, greater is the disinfection rate. And finally, of course, the chemical and physical interference, which is basically we are talking about clumping of the microbial cells or adsorption to larger particles. So all these factors invariably decide whether your disinfection is going to be good or bad. And why so? Because as you can see in the same slide below, microorganisms have also evolved to offer resistance to disinfection. Say for instance, modification of sensitive or disinfectant action site, that is enzymes. So microbes have the potential to modify their enzymes, and since if your enzymes get modified, then the action of the disinfectant would be useless. Okay. Now, microbes also have evolved to alter their cell wall or cell membrane configuration, that is reducing the permeability. If you do that, then the disinfectant would not permeate into the cell. Of course, cellular aggregation, wherein it provides physical protection, and finally capsule protection, that is total limitation of diffusion of disinfectant into the cell. Now let us move on to slide 14, wherein we shall discuss about the various methods of disinfection. To begin with, we have physical disinfection and chemical disinfection, and the examples under these include boiling, ozone treatment, disinfection by using halogens such as iodine, bromine, using excess lime, application of UV rays, utilization of potassium permanganate, which is still seen in rural areas, treatment by silver, that is electrocatadin process, solar disinfection, and of course the most popular and the one which we would be discussing in detail probably in the next session, not this session of course, that is chlorination or application of chlorine. Let us now move on to slide 15. Let us begin with a general understanding of what is a physical method of disinfection. So basically when you're talking about physical methods, we are talking about application of heat or ultraviolet light or filtration process or a radiation process, wherein application of these techniques, these physical methods will assist in removing of microorganisms. But kindly note that they have their own limitations. Okay, say for instance, boiling water may not be effective on a larger scale and may not be economic. Okay, ultraviolet rays is a very costly option. Filtration is not as effective when compared to any other techniques. But what we need to understand is, how does actually a physical method cause disinfection? This is possible because physical methods tend to damage the cell membrane, the cell wall. They tend to alter the permeability factor of a cell membrane. It would inhibit the enzyme activity which happens in a microorganisms. These methods can also cause alteration or change of the pattern in DNA and RNA of the microorganisms. So it is through these combinations and these techniques that physical disinfection is achieved. Now let us move on to slide 16, that is chemical methods. As you can understand, wherein physical methods we never employed any chemicals. We only had altered parameters such as temperature or physical forces. But in slide 16, that is chemical methods, it is the application of a range of chemicals such as iodine, ozone, bromine, KMNO4, chlorine, hydrogen peroxide, alcohols, acids and bases. Okay, but what you need to understand is, each of these chemicals have their own merits and demerits, which sets them apart, and hence depending on the situation, depending on the need, depending on the relative merit and demerit, the application is advented with respect to any of these chemicals. Let us try to understand them one by one. Let us move on to slide 17, wherein we are going to talk about disinfection by ozone. Ozone is actually a strong oxidizing agent, and for the very fact that it is unstable, that is, due to its instability, ozone quickly breaks down into oxygen and atomic oxygen. And let us not forget that nascent oxygen is a very powerful oxidizing agent which can remove microbial matter and also hence kill any microorganisms. Ozone is more rapid, more effective than most of the other technologies, including chlorine, for destroying the viruses and bacteria, including the spores. Please note, ozone is also effective in eliminating compounds which impart objectionable taste and color to water, that is the aesthetic aspect. Being a very strong oxidant, it also has a very low C.T value. Okay, now ozone is generated by passing high voltage through the air between the two electrodes, as you can see in the image. But ozone is more expensive than other techniques, say for instance chlorination, and this expense comes due to the operational cost and also the installation cost. However, they do not leave any residuals behind, which means, such as in chlorination, wherein you would find the presence of trihalomethanes, which are potential carcinogens, ozone does not have any such disinfection. Therefore, it also indicates that ozone has no residual disinfection power. Please note, for ozone to be effective, it is imperative, it is mandatory or important that at least there is a residual ozone of 1 to 2 mg per liter. So, if there are no residuals or a very low level of residuals, then there is no protection against potential new contamination. So, how does ozone actually work? Simple. The disinfection mechanism is wherein the cell membranes of the bacteria and the DNA, RNA of the viruses are directly oxidized to be inactivated, and thereby they achieve killing the bacteria and viruses. Please remember, I am not using the word pathogens, since I said that disinfection will accomplish destroying all microorganisms, whether good or bad. Now let us move on to the next technique, that is disinfection by ultraviolet radiation, slide 18. So by this process, by employing the electromagnetic radiation of your ultraviolet range, microorganisms can be destroyed as well. However, this process is effective only in certain small water supplies wherein the water is already highly polished, which means the water has been subjected to treatments such as sedimentation, coagulation, flocculation, filtration and demineralization. So what I am trying to tell you is, if in case your water is turbid, then this technology is not going to work. And since it is employed only for small scale, we are basically talking about industrial application, breweries, pharmaceuticals, aquariums and so forth. Please note, actually if irradiation has to work, that is if you want ultraviolet rays to be effective in disinfection, in that context irradiation must strike the organism, that is the radiation must strike the microorganism if it has to kill it. In this process, of course, some of the radiation energy is absorbed by the organism and the other constituents in the medium, that is water. Okay, now if you wish to kill the microorganism, then it means that sufficient dosage of ultraviolet radiation must reach the organism, only then the water can be disinfected. Here, that is the germicidal effect of ultraviolet energy, that is the potential effect of ultraviolet energy or radiation to kill the germs or microbes, is thought to be associated by the absorption potential of certain organic components of the microbes, which is essential for the functioning of the cells. So by impairing it, you are able to achieve destruction of the microorganisms. That is, in simple words, dissipation of energy by excitation will cause disruption of the unsaturated bonds, that is say purines and pyrimidines, and this eventually leads to lethal biochemical changes wherein the microorganisms are killed. It has been found that if you wish to have the best germicidal action of ultraviolet rays, then the range of your electromagnetic radiation has to be in the wavelength of 250 to 260 nanometers, or in some literatures it also says 250 to 270 nanometers. Okay, for a given fixed ultraviolet intensity, please note that there is a certain specified contact period to achieve 99% or greater kill for a certain microorganism. For instance, as you can see, for E. coli 60 seconds, Shigella 47 seconds, Streptococcus faeculus, that is 165 seconds, then Bacillus 240 seconds and so forth. So ultraviolet treatment does not actually alter the water chemically. I am sure by now you have understood this. Unlike your previous treatment wherein we spoke about ozone, okay, wherein oxygen or ozone or nascent oxygen is being added to water. Okay, so here only energy is added, that is which produces heat, results in a temperature rise and impairs the microorganisms. Here ultraviolet rays are basically penetrating the cell wall of the microorganisms. So the only requirement is, if you want disinfection to happen, then sufficient ultraviolet radiation must reach the microorganisms. Only then the organisms can be killed. Therefore, one of the main disadvantages of the ultraviolet radiation is the same aspect itself, that is lack of UV rays to reach microorganisms, thereby lack of absorption of ultraviolet rays by microorganisms. Ultraviolet disinfection basically is achieved by using low pressure mercury lamps which emits 253.7 nanometers. Okay, and since it is not producing any toxic byproducts, it effectively damages the microbial and viral DNA or the viral RNA by blocking the nucleic acid replication. But ultraviolet disinfection is costlier than other technologies and cannot achieve residual disinfection. With this knowledge, let us move on to the next technique, that is in slide 19. We have disinfection by boiling and disinfection by sieve. Boiling, which is one of the oldest techniques, is found to be effective, but yes, cannot be practical for huge volumes. You can consider this as a household treatment, but please note, even boiling cannot achieve 100% efficiency because there are microorganisms which can survive at 100 degrees Celsius also, that is the thermophilic bacteria. And if you want boiling to be effective, please note that you need to ensure that your water is boiled at least for 20 minutes. But having said all this, it only takes care of existing contamination and not potential future contaminations. Okay, with this knowledge, let's move on to the next type, that is electrocatadin process or disinfection by silver, wherein metallic silver ions are introduced into the water by passing it through a tube containing solid silver electrodes. If you wish this process to be effective, then the contact period should be about 15 minutes to 3 hours and the dosage should be around 0.05 mg per liter to 0.1 mg per liter. But please note, this technique is costly, however does not add any taste or color to the water. So basically in this process, water is allowed to enter the hollow tubes, water eventually gets energized and the bacteria are killed. So this technique is very good, but yet ineffective when it comes to destroying spores of bacteria, and this technique definitely does not work against algae. Now let us understand disinfection by potassium permanganate, slide 20. Potassium permanganate application is mostly used in villages. It is very effective for water which has less microorganisms, but of course it cannot help us for removing 100%, or it cannot be effective in the event of outbreak of any epidemics. Alright. Applying potassium permanganate basically helps us in oxidizing organic matter. In fact, it can also serve as an algicide, which is that is to kill the algae and also to remove iron and manganese. Please note that the contact period for potassium permanganate is about 4 to 6 hours and the waiting period is about 48 hours. That is, you need to wait until then before you can actually use water after you have applied potassium permanganate. The advantage it offers is it is economical and handy. That is why it is mostly employed in small scale sectors and most villages, rural areas. You see that the water in the villages are pinkish in color, and that is because when you add potassium permanganate, it leaves a pink stain not only to the water but also to the container. Please remember that this popular disinfectant which is used in villages works on a very simple principle. Potassium permanganate, KMnO4, oxidant, which means when you add potassium permanganate into the water, you are basically adding oxygen, which will have the same effect as ozone, that is oxidizing effect. Though potassium permanganate can remove 100% Vibrio cholerae, it cannot remove 100% removal of pathogens from the water. And the simple working mechanism is, when you add KMnO4, it would give you a pink color. But if this pink color disappears immediately, it means that your water is still contaminated, contains organic matter and microorganisms. Therefore, what do? You still have to add more potassium permanganate until the pink color persists. Okay. Having said, the optimum dosage or the required dosage for potassium permanganate would be as low as 0.5 ppm to as high as 2 mg per liter. Let us move on to the next treatment technique for disinfection, that is disinfection by excess lime. Slide 21. So as you can see in this excess line, which we have already discussed when we spoke about coagulation, okay, can achieve in reduction of coliform bacteria by 99%. However, the dosage has to be about 10 to 20 mg per liter, and this treatment with excess line is effective as long as your water is highly alkaline. That is, if your pH is greater than 9.5, or say the best effects would be when the pH is greater than 11, then you will be able to achieve more than 99.9% removal. But still, it does not refer that you can remove 100% of microorganisms. However, this technique is not used anymore, and the reason is, after you apply, you still need to manage the excess lime which you have added. And usually whenever you speak about application of lime, you are talking about generation of sludge or solid waste. But yes, having said all this, sufficient lime will be helpful in killing microorganisms, which means invariably, if your coagulant is lime in the process of clariflocculation, then microbial inactivation is also achieved, as I had stated before, but between the range of 90 to 99%. Let us move on to the next slide, slide 22, wherein we shall talk about the advantages and disadvantages when you use halogens such as bromine and iodine in drinking water. Please note, mostly bromine and iodine cannot be applied to large scales. It can be applied to small scales such as swimming pools, cooling towers and spas, and they are usually applied either in solution form or as pellets. These are of course economical for small scale, but when it comes to large scale, they are ineffective and non-economical as well. Yes, bromine and iodine will be able to achieve disinfection, but not complete disinfection. Most of you are aware that swimming pools employ chlorine as a disinfectant, but it has its own disadvantages. Nowadays, bromine is used as a disinfectant for swimming pool because it is less irritable to the eyes than chlorine itself. Fluorine and iodine are also at times used as disinfectant. However, having said all these techniques, methods are relatively holding one or the other advantage and disadvantage with each other. But chlorine as a disinfectant is mostly widely employed in the present scenario. However, I shall be engaging a separate session to understand the process of chlorination. Therefore, disinfection by chlorine is not part of this presentation. Having said this, let us understand the desirable properties of a disinfectant, that is slide 23. It is obvious that any disinfectant you employ should have the following properties. The disinfectant should be safe to handle, safe to transport, safe to apply. We should be able to quantify the dosage requirement easily. The disinfectant should maintain a residual which takes care of future contaminations. It should be effective under normal circumstances, that is, ambient conditions with respect to pH or temperature. These disinfectants by themselves should not be toxic or harmful to the humans or the aquatic species. And yes, finally, it should also be economical or cost effective. So when you list out all these desirable properties, most probably it is chlorine which satisfies all these criteria except for one, that is with respect to an implication of maintaining a residual. Apart from chlorine, The next best disinfectant is ozone, because ozone is more efficient, faster than chlorine. It needs to be added only in a smaller dosage than chlorine. However, it is expensive and has no residual properties which a disinfectant should have. Also, it doesn't leave any taste or odor that chlorine may add to the water. So what I am trying to express is every disinfectant has an advantage and a disadvantage. Looking at the scenario, the situation, decision has to be made to understand which type of disinfectant to be used. This could be with respect to practical situation, it could be with respect to epidemic conditions, it could be with respect to economic feasibility, it could be with respect to availability of a disinfectant, it could be with respect to quantity of water which has to be treated, and so forth. So my dear friends, we are done with the presentation today. Let me now try to summarize whatever we have learnt. Slide 24. So, disinfection is a final process which is subjected to the water before it is sent for distribution systems. All other treatments such as sedimentation, flocculation, coagulation, filtration, therefore, cannot give you a guarantee that your water is safe to consume. Only disinfection can assure that your water is safe. In the absence of all other processes, disinfection is definitely employed as a single effective treatment process. In this presentation, now you are able to list the various disinfectants such as KMNO4, O3, iodine, bromine. You are also able to categorize disinfection based on physical techniques or chemical techniques. Now you are aware of electrocatodin process. You are also aware of the application of ultraviolet radiation. You have also understood what are the relative merits and demerits each of these techniques possess. And yes, you also have a brief understanding of the theory, that is the kinetics of disinfection, the two critical parameters, that is contact time and dosage concentration. Having said all this, let us remember one aspect. It is understood that drinking water must be essentially free of any pathogen or any disease causing microorganism, but in harsh reality, this is not often the case. Most of the world's population, comprising of the developing nation, underdeveloped nation, still is accessing microbially contaminated water. So hence, in this circumstance, disinfection is the most important process which needs to be provided to any individual, any Homo sapien, any living being on this earth. Slide 25. I leave this to all of you. I request all of you to go through the concept of solar disinfection. It is beyond the syllabus, of course. With this slide, I would request you to explore and come out with the merits and demerits of this technique. I would like you to make a report of how this technique works and which is the potential society which is trying to employ this, and how is this effective when compared to any other technique. Slide 26. These are the references which I have followed. I would request all of you to also go through this for your kind perusal. Slide 27. In next session, we shall be talking about the most popular disinfectant, the most popular disinfection methodology, that is applying chlorine, or in other words, chlorination. In this, we shall discuss about chlorination, its principle, its various types, and so forth. So my dear friends, I am done with today's presentation with respect to disinfection. This is Rajesh Gopinath signing out.